Spacane's northwest corner is Washington, an evergreen playground blessed by an unusual variety of natural attractions. Hundreds of rivers and streams flow through broad valleys of western Washington to the Columbia River, the ocean, and Puget Sound. The many islands, inlets, and harbors of the Sound make it a yachtsman's paradise. The Olympic Mountains rise cool and beautiful between the Sound and the Pacific Ocean, with Gray's Harbor and Willapa Harbor breaking the coastline to the south. In the east is a rolling open plain with some of the most stupendous scenic attractions in the world. Up the west side of the plain and across its top are high pine-clad hills, slashed by deep, rich valleys, and holding Lake Chelan and Roosevelt Lake behind Coulee Dam. And east meets west in the Cascades, with Mount Baker towering in the north, Mount Rainier in the middle, and Mounts Adams and St. Helens in the south, all major peaks. Tallest of all is Rainier chain of playground. Its flanks in spring, summer, and alpine flowers softly cover thousands of meadows all through the mountains. South to Adams and St. Helens, to the mountainside lodges and hiking areas, hills lead out through the mountains to beautiful forest-bound lakes, cool and refreshing. Some trails follow the upper ranges far away from highway and lodge. And whether on long at highway parking areas or around lodges, there is always the promise of adventure and fun. Though deer are naturally shy, they become quite tame, and motorists, picnickers, and hikers are always delighted with their delicate grace. Friendly bear shares, as well as the warmth and cool breezes, with his ticket visitors. Little streams and rocky niches seem to be placed for the particular enjoyment of vacationists. And when many of these join, they become streams, which bidding you welcome to the Cascades. The Olympic Mountains, wonderland of snow-capped peaks, green forests, and trout streams, green trees. Long, lovely blue Lake Crescent, clasped by steep mountainsides, nestles in the north end of it. At many points along the Olympic Highway, trails lead directly from the roadside into deep. Here among centuries-old spruce, fir, hemlock, and cedar, with breezes whispering high overhead and the murmur of rivers breaking stillness, watch the wildest deer, perhaps so teaching her fawn the ways of the woods. By the dozen tumble down off the sides of the Olympic. Picture Indian names like Ho, Coulee, Salduck, Hamma Hamma. Cold, rushing mountain streams alive with fighting trout, silver salmon, and hump, challenging the skill of the sportsman and lending might to the fame of Washington State as a fisherman's paradise. Along the ocean coast of the peninsula and south beyond Gray's Harbor, nature has carved boldly in stone and spread the beaches with soft, clean sand. Washington's saltwater coastline of more than 1,600 miles, including beautiful inlets and bays, provides literally countless sandy beaches in our near towns and cities and on the nearly 200 islands of Puget Sound. To bathe in the cool, refreshing waters, to bask in the warm sun, to splash away in sparkle and spray. That's life at the beaches in Washington. Around the Sound and along the coast are favorite spots for salmon fishing, and it's a real thrill to get up at dawn, maybe take the whole family, and bring in some big ones. 15, 20, 30 pounds, and always the chance of a whopper. Salmon derbies provide competition for prizes, and when the boats are in, contestants gather to weigh and clean their catches and tell of the big ones that got away. Fishing for salmon and halibut is a big-time business, too. From home ports, the fleets go out into the Sound, the straits north of the Olympics, and the ocean, their total catch running into tens of millions of dollars each season. Frequently, boats and crews stay out for days and weeks, And it's hard and heavy, but lucrative work for all hands when the run is good. Fish are transferred to buyers' boats and rushed to market fresh daily. Shellfish, such as Olympia oysters, add millions of dollars in return and lend luster to Washington's reputation as a leading source of seafood delicacies. In the evening, the sight of a sturdy fishing boat pushing along toward home is a symbol of productive industry in a setting of natural beauty. On islands in Sound and spreading across the broad valleys of western Washington from Canada to Oregon are many richly productive farms. Evergreen pasture supports some of the world's prize-winning milk producers and consumers. Through the winter and spring, farmers work to bring a great variety of crops to harvest time. Nature is their friend, where the soil is rich and moist, and the climate mild the year round. When bean stalks are loaded with full, tender pods, when sweet yellow corn is tasseled with gold, when grapes hang heavy on the vine, then, up and down the farming areas, the fruit of the good earth is harvested in great variety, and thousands of tons of food moved to market over the nation for manufacturing, canning, freezing, and fresh use. Timber is regarded more and more as a crop, with harvesting carried on throughout the year. Timber is, in fact, one of the state's most important sources of revenue. As big old giants ripe for harvest and use roll out of the forests, younger trees are left for further growth. To assure even greater harvest, 50 or 100 years from now, seedlings are scientifically grown in nurseries for extensive reforestation. There are great stands of fir, spruce, cedar, and hemlock on the Olympic Peninsula, all along the foothills of the Cascades and in the lower Columbia River area. Trainloads of logs roll daily into cities and towns around Puget Sound, at Gray's Harbor and Willapa Harbor, and to inland river and rail centers. Huge pulp and fiber mills convert hemlock and spruce into an increasingly large number of products, utilizing more and more of the whole logs, even the bark. Many sawmills produce lumber of every description for shipment to national markets. Whole communities and towns are supported by the forest industries, and annual forest celebrations are held, like the Mason County Forest Festival at Shelton, where log bucking contests show wives and visitors how buckers make their living in the woods. Floats are symbolic of the importance of the forests to the people. And doing big things in a big way is a Paul Bunyan tradition, which lives on in the Evergreen Empire. And a new tradition has been born. Keep Washington green. For it is among green forests and in green valleys that the young and vigorous towns and cities of western Washington have been built. Less than 100 years ago, heavy timber covered the hills and waterfront where Seattle now stands. In this short time, Seattle has grown to a metropolitan center of more than 500,000 people, largest city in the Pacific Northwest. Seattle is the gateway to Alaska, portal of the North Pacific. Her waterfront is lined with piers where ships from the far corners of the world discharge cargoes and reload. On the waterfront, too, is the terminus of the large ferry fleet, which connects with many Puget Sound ports. Among Seattle's unique points of interest are the government locks, second only in size to the Panama Canal locks, which lift ocean-going vessels from the saltwater level of Puget Sound to the level of freshwater Lakes Union and Washington. Lake Union is within the very heart of Seattle, and thus the city has exceptional harbor facilities. An arm of Lake Union is Portage Bay, where many pleasure craft are moored, and ocean-going yachts ride at anchor. On the north shore of Portage Bay is the 560-acre campus of the University of Washington, with its 18,000 students. Of many academic buildings, Denny Hall is the most traditional and historic. Philosophy Hall is characteristic of many of the buildings which radiate from the University Library, largest building on the campus. Lake Washington, connected with Portage Bay by a deep water canal, lies to the east of Seattle, with many beautiful homes along the shore. Gorgeous gardens make this truly a city of flowers. Spanning the lake is the famous Lake Washington Floating Bridge, an engineering marvel, 1.25 miles of floating concrete highway, 4 lanes wide. Seattle is a city of many parks. At Woodland Park, more than 900 species of animals, birds, reptiles, and fish attract over 1 million visitors annually who come to see and be seen. Bored? Well, why not? With 1 million people going by yearly. This camel is popular too. In haughty patience, it guards the front door of the Seattle Art Museum in Volunteer Park. The centuries-old stone figures came from China and form a link between two civilizations. Across the sound from Seattle is the Navy Yard city of Bremerton. North are Everett, Seaport and Lumber Center, Mount Vernon, a rich farming center, and Bellingham. Fishing, lumbering, and agricultural hub of Northwest Washington, Bellingham is the home of the North Flower Pageant and of the Western Washington College of Education. The campus school gives student teachers practical training in conducting grade school classes. At Blaine, on the Canadian border, the internationally famous Peace Arch, where was recently celebrated over 100 years of continuous peace. The open gates are a symbol of friendship between two great nations. Tacoma is Washington's third largest city and is located on the shores of Commencement Bay, 30 miles south of Seattle. Tacoma is an important world port and transportation center with heavy shipments of forest products. Its diversified industries include a gold smelter, flour mills, shipyards, and electrochemical works. Tacoma's Point Defiance Park is one of the outstanding attractions of the city. At the very southernmost tip of Puget Sound is Olympia, the state capital, with the legislative building towering above the city, and other governmental buildings grouped on park-like grounds. All the cities of southwestern Washington, such as Olympia, Aberdeen, Chehalis, Centralia, Vancouver, Kelso, and Longview, are strong in forest industries. Revenue from fishing, canning, and agriculture is large. Coastal and Columbia River ports serve ocean-going vessels. At Vancouver and Longview, one of the newer industries, aluminum manufacturing. But like most other western Washington cities, their historic strength comes from agriculture, the forests, and their proximity to the ocean. Up the Columbia River and across the Cascades, eastern Washington is almost like another land. Immediately east of the Cascade Range is a chain of high hills reaching to Canada and across the top of eastern Washington to Idaho. Nestling in the southern end of the hills is the rich, fertile Yakima Valley, with Yakima as the county seat. Yakima is a clean, busy, modern city of over 35,000 people with miles of fruit shipping warehouses and packing houses. Among the unique crops of the rich and heavily irrigated soil is hops. At harvest time, platoons of mechanical monsters move through fields covering hundreds of acres. The harvesting machines receive the whole vines and leave behind trails of sacked hop blossoms, which are picked up by truck crews and rushed to gigantic mechanized structures known as drying machines, which clean, bale, and dry the crop. While hops are grown on a large scale, the fertile Yakima Valley is also famous for the variety and quantity of its luscious, sweet, soft fruits, enjoyed by consumers everywhere. In the next valley north at Ellensburg is the Central Washington College of Education. Established in 1891, this school of higher education is the cultural and educational center of Central Washington. It is an important teacher training center, and like the Eastern and Western Colleges of Education, has a good liberal arts school. High in the hills surrounding Ellensburg is much rich grazing land, and the raising of sheep and cattle has made Ellensburg an important stock center. Ellensburg is also the home of the famed annual Ellensburg Rodeo, where each fall the pageantry of the Old West lives again. From the hills come Indians of many tribes in their full, colorful regalia to join in the big events. And as cowboys and cowgirls take their chances for big prizes on wild horses and steers, thousands of spectators join in the cry, "Ride 'em, cowboys!" North across high pine-clad hills are the valleys of the apple country. The floors of Wenatchee, Chelan, and Okanagan valleys are literally covered with apple orchards. And the city of Wenatchee has been called the apple capital of the world. Here each spring, when trees are pink and white with blossoms, the Washington State Apple Blossom Festival is held. To watch the colorful celebrations, thousands of people gather from all over the Pacific Northwest. The state's governor crowns the queen, giving dramatic testimony to the importance of the country and its people. Then, with the Blossom Queen and her court enthroned, a great chorus prepares to sing in happy celebration of the promise of the blossom. Months later, throughout the apple valleys, branches are laden with fruit. So heavily loaded are the trees that the limbs would break if they were not cropped. Golden Delicious, a strain brought to perfection by Washington orchardists. Red Delicious, so big that only 3 dozen fill a full-size box. Harvesting is a symphony of human and mechanical action, keeping apples moving from hundreds of orchards to dozens of processing plants for cleaning, sorting, grading, and packing, and then on to rail centers, finally joining whole train loads moving out across the valleys, plains, and mountains, even across oceans. Washington apples for a world appetite. Threading from the Chelan apple orchards back into the Cascade Mountains is Lake Chelan, with peaks rising directly out of the blue waters. The area has been called the Switzerland of America. High above each valley, along hilly ridges, are open ranges, rich with yellow grass and dotted with pine trees. These lush hillsides have helped make Washington a big beef-raising state. Thousands of head of heavy steers are brought to prime condition on the ranges, then rounded up in corrals at strategic locations for shipment to markets. The hill country is alive with deer, too. And in the fall, when the golden leaves of the aspen quiver, it's time for fleet-footed mule deer and whitetails to match wits with thousands of hunters. The hills are the evergreen pine belt of central and eastern Washington. The high-speed exhaust of power saws and the crash of falling trees echoes at many points from Spokane to the south end of the Cascades. Cutting is largely on a selective basis, providing for the future cycle of growth and harvest. Pine logs are in big demand for boxes and crates to pack fruit and produce, and for furniture, doors, barrels, and a host of other finished products. The hill country swings in a vast curve around the central plateau, with the Columbia River rolling west and then south between hills and plateau. Blocking the surge of the Columbia is Coulee Dam, the largest structure ever built by man, with 3 times the bulk of Boulder Dam. Its 25 million tons of masonry hold back a man-made lake which reaches into Canada. Powerhouses at the foot of the dam seem small in comparison, yet they are as high as 11-story office buildings. The electric power generated at Coulee is transmitted hundreds of miles over high-tension lines to substations in distant cities, there to merge with Washington's tremendous pool of more than 1/10 of the nation's hydroelectric power. Scientists say that thousands of years ago, where Coulee Dam now stands, a vast mass of ice and rock, infinitely bigger than the dam, blocked the channel of the Columbia, forcing it to turn directly south in a raging torrent. Then the ice dam melted, and the river returned to its old bed, leaving behind a chain of starkly beautiful lakes with sheer rock walls and endless scenic variety. The greatest remnant of that past ice age is Dry Falls, over which once thundered a cataract equal to 40 Niagaras, far larger than any falls now on Earth. Millions of tons of rock were ground to bits by the roaring torrent of ice and water and carried many miles south by the swift current, there to be deposited over a vast area. The chain of lakes and this barren sagebrush land is all that remained after the river subsided and returned to its old bed. But today, man plans to use part of the power of Coulee to pump water out of the lake behind Coulee Dam into big ditches and thence to the desert, bringing life to the dry silt left by the Columbia on its prehistoric rampage. Some parts of the desert are now being irrigated by smaller projects. Wherever water is put on the land, spectacularly big crops are raised. At harvest time, tons of potatoes move out of the earth by continuous conveyor and into carts that travel beside the harvesting machine. None of the potatoes are wasted. Part of the potato crop is stacked on an unused airstrip and crushed for dehydration and industrial use. Road rollers make good potato mashers, though somewhat bulky for the average kitchen. The bulk of the crop moves by truck to rail centers and from there to market. Pea growing has increased so rapidly that Washington now raises over half the nation's supply for canning and freezing. Modern pea growing operations are located throughout the state. West of Dry Falls and Coulee Dam and east of the Reclamation Project, covering much of the land of the Idaho border, is the rich Washington wheat belt. From the top of Steptoe Butte, in the heart of the Palouse country of eastern Washington, a vista of wheat farms stretches in every direction, as far as the eye can see. The annual yield is very heavy, far above the national average of bushels per acre. The farmers of a large part of eastern Washington have never known a crop failure. And when harvesting begins, the bounty of the fields overflows the state and the nation to world markets. Through this fabulously rich wheat country, the Snake River flows west to join the Columbia at Pasco. Where the rivers join is Sacagawea Park, with a museum filled with Indian arrowheads and relics, and named after the Indian girl who guided Lewis and Clark to Washington. Today, the park is a favorite spot for fishing, picnicking, and boating. Another city rich in historic background is Walla Walla, largest city in southeast Washington, where Whitman College commemorates the fame of Marcus Whitman, who braved tremendous odds to establish an Indian mission and finally was massacred. His spirit lives on at Whitman College. At Pullman, 8 miles from the Idaho border, is Washington State College, whose experimental laboratories, extension courses, and regular college classes have had much influence on agriculture and education over the whole state. At Cheney, north of Pullman, is the Eastern Washington College of Education, one of Washington's teacher training institutions. Cheney is also the home of important flour milling plants. Still further north is Spokane, second largest city in Washington, with a population of over 150,000. Spokane is the commercial capital of the rich wheat country and an important center of magnesite, lead, and gold mining. Aluminum manufacturing is one of her new industries. Her fine shops, hotels, banks, and transportation facilities make Spokane the metropolis of the Inland Empire. From eastern Washington to the coast, the whole Evergreen Empire is an outdoor sports playground, with golfing high in popularity everywhere. Boating, too, is an outstanding activity. There are more registered boat owners in Washington lakes, rivers, and salt water than in any other state in the Union. Even at Moses Lake, in the sagebrush land near Coulee Dam, speedboats rouse denizens of the deep to come up and watch man at play. At Lake Washington, boat owners by the hundreds gather to watch the university's crews compete with those from other states. University crews have been Olympic champions, many times national winners, and the famous Washington stroke has revolutionized crew racing. In the Evergreen state, there's a saying, 2 hours from sea level to ski level. And during the long season, highway crews keep the roads open for the tens of thousands of skiers who motor to many points in the Cascades, the Olympics, and eastern Washington slopes. High in the Cascades are fast downhill and slalom courses, attracting the ace men and women skiers of the Pacific Northwest, as well as leading racers from other ski centers of Europe and America. There's many a thrill for spectator and performer alike, and sometimes the end of the run is toughest of all. This fellow lost a ski. He's going to make it on termination. Parts of the Evergreen state are linked together by broad, smooth highways. The towering mountains, the modern, friendly cities, the innumerable rivers and lakes, and the inviting waters of sound and ocean are but hours apart. All Washington bids you come enjoy the Evergreen state.